Hello, everyone. Clarissa Shields here, the undisputed middleweight champion, and you are listening to Ringside Boxing Show.
Live from Monterey on California's beautiful Central Coast, this is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm Dennis Taylor, inviting you to join me and my expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, and John J. Responte, today and every week for the hottest, sweatiest show on West Coast radio. And now, from Studio 1A, it's the Ringside Boxing Show. Hey, welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor, and we've got some excellent stuff on the horizon for you today. In a few minutes, John Responte and I are going to be talking to a boxing historian who grew up in Los Angeles watching some of the greatest fighters who ever lived at places like the Olympic and the Forum and the Main Street Gym. And he tells that story in his latest book, Latino Boxing in Southern California. We're going to be talking to Hall of Fame author Gene Aguilera about the years he spent watching fighters like Salvador Sanchez, Ruben Olivares, Carlos Palomino, Danny Little Red Lopez, Lupe Pintor, Pepino Cuevas, Schoolboy Bobby Chacon, many others, most of whom he came to know personally on some level through the years. Gene's also going to tell us about some of the great characters who shaped the Southern California boxing tapestry, like Don Chargan, Eileen Eaton, Howie Steinler, and the mobsters who sat ringside as they presided over the sport in the 1960s. A lot of other great stuff, too. That conversation is going to be an amazing trip through boxing history for everybody, and we'll have it for you very shortly. First, we're going to talk to our expert analysts about a fight on Saturday night that probably boosted the self-esteem of fat guys all over the world, Andy Ruiz. A 25-1 betting underdog at this time last week, decked undefeated Anthony Joshua 4 times at Madison Square Garden and TKO'd him in the 7th round to win 3 of the 4 major heavyweight title belts in one of the biggest upsets in recent memory. Let's dissect that shocker with our 3 expert analysts. Travis Hartman is a professional boxer, trainer, and promoter from Osborne, Missouri. He's now living and training in Orlando, Florida. Rizwan Zahid, the boxing journalist from Toronto. And John J. Responte is chief lead writer for MaxBoxing.com and DogHouseBoxing.com. And John and I are co-authors of Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward boxing trilogy, an Amazon bestseller. Okay, so guys, there's an obvious comparison to be made here between Ruiz's staggering upset over Joshua and some other classic heavyweight upsets of modern times, including Hasim Rahman's KO of Lennox Lewis in 2001, Buster Douglas' knockout of Mike Tyson in 1990, Michael Spinks knocking off Larry Holmes in 85, Leon Spinks beating Muhammad Ali in 1978. John will remember that one. And Cassius Clay upsetting Sonny Liston way back in 1963. And you could probably also throw in TKO victories by Corey Sanders and Layman Brewster over Vladimir Klitschko. So, John, when you think about some of those shockers I just mentioned, you know, I'm not sure Ruiz over Joshua ranks above any of those, but if anybody tells me they saw this one coming, I'm going to be rolling my eyes. This was amazing. At the same time, you know, it makes me wonder if Anthony Joshua has been overrated all this time, something I wouldn't say about any of the other champs I just mentioned who got knocked off unexpectedly. John, was it wishful thinking for us to elevate Joshua as much as we probably did after just 22 pro fights, or did he earn that pedestal by beating Klitschko and Povetkin and Joseph Parker?
Yeah, you know, what popped into my mind, Dennis, a really older one was when Max Schmeling knocked out the unbeatable, the invincible Joe Louis in 1936. Yeah. That was what kind of popped into my. But I don't really want to put any of these guys in that category because we never considered them that good. What I remember us talking about was that we liked it that the heavyweight division was exciting again, and it was important in a sense that we had some interesting fighters, and I think we might have overrated them a little bit, but that's because of the competition that are the heavyweights nowadays. We knew that talent-wise and all that they're only okay. I think we always talked about and the only thing I'll say is in my articles, and Max Warren, who wrote an article for Max Boxing that said the reasons why Ruiz is not a 25-1 underdog. That's as close as we got, but it's because Joshua would have problems in fights. We saw it. We saw it in a lot of his fights. We saw him get stunned. We saw him get buzzed. We saw Dillian White hurt him. We saw Klitschko almost finish him. And if he had maybe been a little bit more frantic, he might have. Carlos Takam gave him some problems. Povetkin wobbled him. So we knew that his chin was a problem and maybe his stamina. The thing was about last night was two things that really popped into my head last night was, one was that Ruiz has a great chin. He got hit with a cracking left hook. Mm-hmm. And when he went down, he looked at Joshua like, wow, man, that was really a good shot. But he was not really that hurt. He got up, and he was back in the fight a few seconds later when he floored Joshua. And then the second was when Joshua was in his corner and his trainer was talking to him, and he looked so, and it probably because he was woozy still, but he looked so confused, and he said, so what's he going to do? What's he going to do? And I thought, God, man, 22 pro fights, a number of amateur fights, and you obviously cannot figure out what Ruiz is doing. So that told me some things about him that, yes, we definitely overrated him, that in a way he was still a little green about things. But, hey, last night was just incredible. And that's, again, what makes sports so incredible, and boxing the most shocking when these things happen. Because I'm just sitting there and I'm writing an article while it's happening, and I just went, whoa. When he went down, I thought, man, he's hurt, because he got hit with a temple shot, and his equilibrium was all messed up. And I thought, my God, Ruiz is going to do it. So it makes you smile in a way, because it just shows that anybody, doesn't matter about the odds. It is. That's why I call him the Mexican Rocky in a way. Anybody can do it. Yep. It can happen. We're so sure about the outcomes sometimes, but hey, I don't care who we are. I don't care how much we think we know. These things will happen. And Ruiz just had the one thing that we also talked about, his hand. His hands were faster. Yeah. And he would get to Joshua first. And his chin was stronger, obviously. When they asked him, how did you get up from that left hook? And he goes, I don't know, man. I just really, really wanted it. And he showed it. So I really want to hear what Travis says, because that was a stunner, wasn't it, Travis?
I'm trying to think of a Mexican with a bad chin, first of all.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
It's so true, Dennis, because, Mexicans are just known for their hard work ethic and hard heads, I guess, for the most part. How many Mexicans do you know that will get knocked out? Top Mexicans that get really knocked out ever. Like, those guys are the toughest to fight. Nobody wants to fight Mexicans unless you're Floyd Mayweather, then he loves to fight Mexicans. But other than that, most people don't. But I think last night was, I'm not wrong often, and I have to take my medicine like a man, and I was wrong here. I thought that Anthony Joshua was going to stop Andy Ruiz, and he didn't. And all credit to Ruiz, guys. Like, that was just – I don't want to take anything away from this. I don't think that Anthony Joshua was crazy overhyped. I did think that people gave him a lot of credit. I still think he's good. I just don't like it when a fighter loses one fight, how everybody's jumping on this bandwagon now, like, oh my gosh, Anthony Joshua's a fraud. I don't think that. I think Anthony Joshua probably underestimated him. Anthony Joshua didn't look himself to me. And I think John made a point when he was in the corner asking the corner what he should do. I think he was concussed. I don't think he was all there. He never fully recovered from that first knockdown, and Anthony Joshua was just staggering around the whole ring, it felt like. And it was a very odd-looking Anthony Joshua, that's for sure. Like, he just seemed confused out there. Even when they stopped it, the referee's like asking him if he wants to fight. He almost was like he was confused. He was like, where am I at? That's what it seemed like to me.
Yeah.
And I think the referee did an amazing job, because really, the announcers pointed it out. One of the first or second knockdown, I think it was, Anthony Joshua wasn't really responsive to the referee, like putting his hands up and walking forward and all of that. Yeah. So the referee, he did a fantastic job, because he technically probably could have stopped it earlier, and he didn't. He let it go. But I think the stoppage was correct. And back to Ruiz. Ruiz had the faster hands. He had the willpower. He had the heart. I I don't know if this is a good thing or bad thing that he won since he was a smaller guy, because smaller guy as in he was the shorter guy, because we all know that he's very heavy. His weight is. I don't think that's a good example, because the guy looks like he's crazy out of shape. I never understand that, because obviously I'm a professional boxer myself now, 15 years, and I've never understood how these heavyweight professional elite athletes can look like that. I never understand them, because I know for a fact that Ruiz trains. I mean, look at the guy. He can go 12 rounds, and he's fast, and he has hand speed, but for whatever reason, his physique just looks absolutely horrendous. He just looks like a trash man out there that he put boxing gloves on, and he's like, oh, I better show up and fight. But he obviously has got skill. He can fight. He's got the willpower. He's got the determination. And I think two things happened last time. I think Ruiz didn't get the credit that he deserved as a very top-level heavyweight, because I still think he is. In my opinion, I think Anthony Joshua had an off night for sure and took his opponent a little bit lighter. I think if they rematch, I know that I'm speaking too early here, but I think that Anthony Joshua does beat him in the rematch, gets his stuff back together, and the rematch will be back overseas in Joshua's home country, so he'll be more comfortable there. But I do think he beats Ruiz in the rematch. But I don't want to take anything from Ruiz, because he did what he had to do, and he didn't just beat Anthony Joshua. He didn't just beat Goliath. He destroyed Goliath, because that's his name, Andy the Destroyer. He destroyed him. It wasn't like a one lucky punch. He destroyed him. And I don't know about you guys, but I was just watching that just in shock. Like, I didn't even know how to react. I'm like, is this like really happening? I even woke up this morning, and I don't really have any allegiance to either fighter, but I woke up this morning and I was just like, did that fight really happen? That's how amazing boxing is. That's
Travis,
the beauty.
This is what we all love about boxing. Entire careers can turn in the blink of an eye. Joshua decks Ruiz in the third round, makes everybody think it's going to be a short night. He goes in for the finish. He gets clipped by that counter left, and suddenly he's on the floor. And from that point on, everything changes. Joshua's going down 3 more times in the fight. The fight gets stopped. Was that first knockdown the moment in Joshua's career when he was exposed as the new Frank Bruno? A guy who looks a lot better than he was.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we are looking at people, and I always tell people this in boxing as well. And when they see me fighting a guy with these big, huge muscles, and I always tell them, I'm like, I'm not going to hit him in their muscles, guys. I'm not hitting him in his arm. I'm hitting him right in his chin. He can lift as many weights as he wants, and he can get as buff as he wants. I'm going to test his chin. And you know what? That's what Ruiz did last night. He tested Anthony Joshua's chin. He tested Anthony Joshua's willpower, and he outwilled him. I don't want to say that Anthony Joshua quit, because he did get up 3 times. He got up. He did. I want to give him credit, because he really did. But he kind of did give up. Otherwise, he would have kept fighting until he was knocked out. But I think he was concussed. I genuinely believe that. I don't know that he quit. He's on the borderline of that. I see a lot of people talking about how, the greats don't quit and all of that. And I can see how people think that he quit. But he did get up 3 times. He never stayed down. He really did. He got up 3 times. So I don't think that he necessarily quit. But back to your point, Dennis, heavyweight boxing, they always say that the success of boxing goes with the heavyweight division. And if that's any kind of indicator of what boxing is headed towards, we're in for an amazing ride. Because that second round, I think it was easily already a candidate for round of the year, where Anthony Joshua knocks Ruiz down. Ruiz comes back and knocks Anthony Joshua down twice. It's an amazing fight. When I'm sitting here, I'm a veteran of 29 years in the boxing game, and I didn't know how to score that round, because Anthony Joshua knocked him down once, then Ruiz knocked Anthony Joshua down twice, and I'm like, is that like a 9-7 round? What is this? Like, this is a new thing for boxing, and it's amazing, because it's the beauty and the beast of boxing. You never know what's going to truly happen, and this is why I don't like it when people 100% count somebody out. And I'm not saying that I was guilty of that. I did predict that Anthony Joshua would win. I never once, and you'll never hear me say, there's no chance in heck this guy can win. I never say that. I just give my prediction based on my experience and my knowledge, and I thought that Anthony Joshua, just like the rest of the world, thought that Anthony Joshua had just enough to beat a guy like Ruiz. But you know what? Yeah. He proved us all wrong, and he proved his family right, and it couldn't happen to a better guy.
Nobody picked Ruiz. Nobody. No. They said they picked Ruiz, they're lying. Okay, Riz, Ruiz is a guy who lost a majority decision a couple of years ago to Joseph Parker, who to me is clearly second-tier heavyweight. You know, he's good. He's just nowhere near great. And that was really the biggest name on his record until Saturday. Is he a whole lot better than people thought? Is he a guy that we should take seriously against Fury or Wilder?
I think it's just way too early to say. You know, I'll say this about Ruiz. In that fight, he was definitely quite passive in the Parker fight. And I think he definitely learned his lesson. And as far as, you know what, I can't tell. I said this before the fight. I can't believe how fat he is. And I said this, like, not even so much an insult, but almost the same way. Like, how are you a professional? But I never, I see some comparisons with him and Areola. Ruiz has always had boxing skills. I've always seen his skill, because for a guy that massive, because recently his last fight, I believe he beat Dimitrenko, excuse me, and his speed was apparent, right? And he clearly has boxing skill. He knows how to move his head. He knows how to get in and out. And that's what, you know, all the other upsets you kind of mentioned. Outside maybe, you know, Buster Douglas and Tyson. And that's kind of the opposite, where Buster Douglas came in better shape than he ever has. The big difference I saw here was Ruiz was actually schooling Joshua. Even for the first 3 rounds, I saw some of the scorecards were close. I had Ruiz definitely winning the first 2 rounds. Or at least it was close, because, you know, he was backing up Joshua, and Joshua tried to come forward to land a right hand, and Ruiz just takes a little step back. And, you know, his footwork and all that is there. You know, this wasn't just this wasn't a Hakeem Rahman, Lennox Lewis, I landed a big shot kind of knockout. That's what makes this very surprising. Actually, if you go back and watch it, I actually rewatched all the knockdowns. Even when Joshua got the knockdown, Ruiz was trying to do the same thing. So Ruiz got caught, and he was trying to throw back at that moment, because he realized that when Joshua lands a shot, he opens up. And when he opens up, the guy with the better skill and the better speed has to take a risk, but he'll be able to actually do more. And so Ruiz got knocked down, and then Joshua went in for the kill. But and Ruiz took a couple of good shots, but he was still, you know, mentally he was still there, and he was still walking forward. He wasn't backpedaling. And when he did that, he was right in his wheelhouse, and then he unloaded like easily a 10, 15 punch combination, and then put Joshua down. And if you look at in the 7th round, the same thing happened. Joshua landed a left hook. Joshua thought, okay, I have him. And then Ruiz said, all right, I'm going to put my foot down, and I'm going to unleash a combination because he's open. And he opened that up. He's still able to use his head movement and all that to he was able to use his head movement to get open space and land a combination. And then Joshua got back up, and then the same thing happened. Joshua landed about a left hook, literally maybe half a millisecond before Ruiz unleashed that combination that finished him. So this was we talked about Joshua being raw. Now conceivably the same thing could have happened to Wilder, right? Because Wilder's a freakish puncher and a great athlete and all that, but he was hurt against Luis Ortiz, and some people think Luis Ortiz is about 45 years old, which very well could be. But the first shot actually that Ruiz landed that caused Joshua to wobble was one of those tempo shots, and that does a lot. And because none of the other knockdowns, even though Joshua was clearly hurt with the other knockdowns, he wasn't. We've seen guys be almost laid out, and like Tyson Fury was pretty much out with a huge shot on the chin, and he gets back up. That's not really what happened here. Joshua was able to get back up, but it's clearly like the one punch at the beginning did all the damage at that point. So it's interesting to see that. It's interesting that Ruiz, number one, he was able to learn from his mistakes, but number two, he already has a skill set to do good things. I never thought that Joshua and Wilder were the best skilled heavyweights in the division. They were clearly the most athletic. They were clearly the two best, but that doesn't mean they were actually the most skilled. And that's why Fury should have beat Wilder. And that's why we've seen guys like Povetkin have good success against Joshua. That's why we've seen even guys like Luis Ortiz have good success against Wilder, because all those guys are better skilled. But, for one reason or another, with Povetkin and Ortiz, both of those guys are late 30s at least. Fury obviously pretty much had a 2-year layoff at that point, but even then, most people thought he beat Wilder. And then Ruiz, again, it's the same thing. This guy's, arguably 30 pounds overweight, but he clearly has enough skill to make it a fight. And again, it's not, I think 2 of the judges had him ahead at that time. And if you look at during the fight, it's funny because Travis kind of mentioned this. The big muscles is always harder for a fighter actually to breathe because a lot of extra weight. That's what made Wilder still has that power in the 12th round. Joshua kind of does here and there, but he takes a few rounds off. Yesterday, in about round 4, especially when in round 3 when Ruiz landed those combinations, it wasn't Ruiz who was breathing hard. It was Joshua. He was the one who had to take some deep breaths. I never saw Ruiz tired at all. I never saw him. He's very calm and composed. And his fighting, you know what he is actually? And I thought this before the fight. He has so many skills as James Toney, and I think he has the same nutrition plan as James Toney, because both of them it's just the same skill. But he has the same demeanor as James Toney. You don't see him calm, and that's why guys with those extra weight, it's not a problem for them to go 12 rounds, and it's not a problem for them to have the sustained stamina because there's no energy that's being wasted. And it's funny because I'm sitting here and thinking, I think he should lose some weight. But what the hell? I mean, what am I to say? This guy just scored 4 knockdowns and pulled off, maybe the biggest upset since Tyson Douglas. And again, you're saying now on the other side for Joshua, even though when Corey Sanders knocked out Vladimir Klitschko, people said Klitschko was overrated and people said he should retire. And Brewster did the same thing. They said that was it for Klitschko. So, and that's what Joshua's mentality kind of went across. And I guarantee you Joshua will talk to Klitschko about this loss and how he comes back from it. Because it's up to, we can see it going both ways. We can see Joshua losing in the rematch and kind of folding and we kind of never hear from him again. Or we can see him take care of business in the rematch and just put this behind him, and he could conceivably have a great run at heavyweight. Because there's no one who thought after Vladimir Klitschko lost to Corey Sanders and Lamont Brewster that he was going to go unbeaten for 10 years. There's absolutely no one on the face of the earth, including his brother, Vitaly Klitschko, who told him to retire, that thought that would happen. So this is up on Joshua one way or the other. I think Ruiz is a skilled fighter who knows what he's doing, and he capitalized on the same Joshua mistake repeatedly. But you know what? Like I said, this wasn't Joshua just getting caught. I think that's the danger here. It wasn't. He didn't get cocky. He didn't get cocky the way Lewis did against Rahman and then got caught with a punch. He was getting outboxed. He was getting schooled. And even though he may very well beat, Ruiz in a rematch, I don't think that, even if he won yesterday, I thought Wilder would beat him at that point. But I think more importantly, I think Tyson Fury is the happiest guy in the world right now, because if you're basing, Tyson Fury's win against Wilder, should have won against Wilder, and everyone's kind of recent performance, and you're looking at matchups, I don't think anyone's going to beat Tyson Fury at this point if he's committed the way we expect him to be. But you know what, Andy Ruiz, we can't ignore him in the conversation, even if you don't think he's a top 3 heavyweight anymore, because he is the heavyweight champion.
Yeah, 3 belts, man. This is brilliant stuff. Okay, so John, what does this outcome say about the concept of letting a big fight marinate for months and even years? Nothing is more tantalizing than a collision between 2 unbeaten, seemingly invincible fighters. How far does Joshua's stock plunge from this disappointment? Suddenly Joshua is nobody special. He got knocked out by a short, fat guy who was a last-minute replacement, and he's going to have to figure out how to rebuild that aura that he's kind of lost forever. So now the heavyweight division is all about Fury and Wilder. Those guys are the invincibles now, and Joshua is a guy with holes in his game physically and tactically and probably emotionally. Eddie Hearn said this morning, that he thinks a lot of pressure came off Joshua because he lost his O. Well, what is he, an orchid? John, do you think Eddie Hearn feels like he made a mistake this morning by taking the long road to that treasure chest showdown with either Wilder or Fury? Should he be second-guessed for that?
I think so, Dennis. You're on to something really good, because when I noticed that when Joshua was walking out to the ring, Eddie Hearn looked like the most nervous guy in the world. Promoters say a lot of things. Most of it's bull, as we know, but maybe there was some truth when he said, look, I'm really worried about this fight. Mm-hmm. Maybe he really meant it. because he looked so jumpy and nervous when he was behind Joshua. He was moving, and I had never seen him look like that before. So, yeah, there definitely was something going on in his mind that he was worried about this fight. And, you know, it just makes you wonder what people know about their fighters, too, because, you know, it was also interesting. I meant to mention this when I was talking about it, how during the fight, Joshua's corner was telling him, just box, you know, and this is a guy with 22 fights, 21 knockouts, and it's like they're aware of his shortcomings. So, just box. It's like, whoa, you know. So there was I think Travis and Riz really hit on some things. There was a lot going on going into this fight. During the fight, I agree with Travis. I was watching Joshua in the first few rounds, and I was like, wow, I've never seen him back up like this. What's going on there? It was like even before he got hurt, he was like, I don't really know how to deal with this guy because it's like Ruiz said. Ruiz said before the fight, look, everybody's scared of Joshua. I'm not scared of him. I'm going to take the fight to him, and when I get an opportunity, I'm going to land. And it's exactly what he did, you know. And I think Joshua was surprised, and I think what Hearn said was true. Joshua was probably tired in a way because of all the pressure. You're right, Dennis. I don't think that's a good sign. I mean, I know they want to do the rematch right away, and I won't be surprised at all if Joshua wins the rematch. It's going to go and do it in the UK, and he can find a way to probably outbox him and stay away from some of those firefights on the inside and hopefully not get clipped again. But emotionally, mentally, you know, it is very similar to a Klitschko situation because he has to rebuild himself in a sense. I mean, I don't know if it's the smartest thing in the world to get back in there with Ruiz. You got to make sure you're ready. He's talking about November, and not very far away. So, and yes, I think Eddie Hearn feels that he was doing what they do nowadays, which is marinate a fight, and it's risky. We know that. It's very risky, and this is why. Something like this could happen. You know, there's that if he wins the next fight, then we'll fight. It's like Wilder and Fury are going to fight in 2020 if they win their interim fights. And as we've seen, nothing's guaranteed. So, yeah, I'm sure Eddie's second-guessing himself, but I also think Eddie, this is just my opinion, I think Eddie was very protective of Joshua. I do. I think he was trying to make the most out of what he had, like he should. I mean, he's his promoter. I don't blame him for that. But he might have outsmarted himself this time, and by picking Ruiz as the opponent. But again, that's Monday morning quarterbacking and all that. And if Joshua had knocked out Ruiz in the third round, we would have been saying, well, okay, that went about the way we expected. So that's just life sometimes, and that's boxing because of the risky nature of it.
Travis, was this outcome good for boxing, or did it drag the whole heavyweight division down a few rungs on the ladder and make us wonder whether today's heavyweights really deserve the attention we're giving them?
You know what? I don't think so. I think that it's amazing for boxing and the heavyweight division. I think that fight was action-packed and it was exciting and it was suspense. And that's what everybody wants. You want people on the edge of their seats, and that's exactly what happened. People were literally on the edge of their seat. And if they weren't on the edge of their seat, they were staring at their TV with their jaw dropped. And if there was a camera on me when I was watching that fight, that's exactly what I looked like. I was sitting there with my jaw just kind of open. It was kind of a blank stare. My phone was blowing up with text messages from people that normally don't even watch boxing, and they were shooting me messages like, oh, my gosh, because they all read my statuses and I do my predictions. And usually I'm correct on my predictions. And I was so far off on this one, so everybody was blowing me up. So in my opinion, I think it's amazing for boxing. I think it's amazing for the heavyweight division. I think that it shows that we don't always know who's going to win. No matter how much we want to promote a guy, no matter how much we want to put the guy out there as the next greatest thing in the world, we never truly know in boxing until that final bell rings in the 12th round and the guy has his hand raised. That's when we know who's going to win. Otherwise, you got to fight the fight, and you have to fight the fight for 12 rounds. There's no taking seconds off, no taking minutes off, because if you do, a guy like Andy Ruiz can end your undefeated streak, can end your lineal heavyweight titles, can end all of those. Andy Ruiz is literally, guys, that guy is our heavyweight champion of the world with the most belts right now. Like, let that sink in. Andy Ruiz, He has the majority of the belts in the world right now in the heavyweight division. It's just wild. I think it's so great for boxing.
Okay, so Riz, if you're Team Ruiz, what do you do next? Do you rematch Joshua right away and give him a chance to prove this was a fluke? Rematches, didn't work out that well for Leon Spinks and Hasim Rahman and Layman Brewster and a few other guys. So do you make a little bit of money defending against some second-tier guy that you can beat and then wait for the Fury Wilder winner? What's the strategy for them? What should they do?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that I am actually, I like Joshua. I really do. I think he's a good guy. But I'm thrilled that this happened because I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Hurd and Julian Williams. This is karma, right? This idea of marinating in boxing has to stop. Mm-hmm. And this is what, fans are thrilled about this. Excuse me. Because they wanted that big fight. Wilder and Joshua were going back and forth about big money and whatever else. Joshua still makes more money than Wilder, so Wilder should have taken that fight because he would have earned a payday. And Joshua has lost a bargaining chip. So all of them kind of lose. The guys who win are guys like Ruiz because guys like him were willing to take a fight on 6 weeks' notice. And that's what makes true champs, right? It's not, yes, it's about talent and all that things, but as soon as things get in the way of a boxer's mentality of who they are as fighters and fighters first, that's when you see the difference. That's when you see guys lose. That's when you see upsets, and that's when you see all these things. Because, actually, funny enough, Lennox Lewis actually told me this many years ago when he was talking about when he fought Vitaly Klitschko. He said, when I fought, after I beat Tyson, like that was a huge chip off my shoulder. And for me, even though he beat Klitschko, debatable with the cut and all that stuff, but he said it was very hard for me to get motivated for that fight because at that point it was like I already, I did what I wanted to do. Anything else was just going to be extra, and that's why he decided to call it a career at the time. And I think that's what you saw with Hurd and Julian Williams. Hurd probably had no interest in fighting Julian Williams, and Julian Williams, on the other hand, was not thinking, oh, I'm going to come here and just be the opponent. And he had losses, just like Ruiz, and he came in, he learned from his mistakes, and he said, all right, what do I have to do here? The commentator said it throughout. They said it throughout that he was in the best shape of his career. We've never seen him in this shape. Then on top of that, I found out he was actually fasting for Ramadan. So I don't know, he probably used that in a way to get in better shape. But there's a guy, while you're thinking about another fighter, this guy's coming in and he's eating, sleeping, and breathing you. He's waiting for this opportunity. And Andy Ruiz, again, 6 weeks notice, right? He comes in and he takes the title. And again, it wasn't just one shot, right? He won he outboxed him. And that's why I think he should take the immediate rematch for sure. Because as you mentioned, immediate rematches don't always work out. But if you look at, sometimes it works out the complete opposite, right? Shane Mosley has never had success in rematches when he's lost, right? And those I think are a little similar because when Rinky Wright and Vernon Forrest beat him the second time around, they were the better skilled guys, and that's how. And I think Mosley probably thought in both those fights he was going to be able to knock both those guys out, just like Joshua probably thought over here. I think the danger is that Joshua was not winning the fight. And honestly, I don't think he was ever at a point of winning the fight. The only time he was winning the fight was 20 seconds after he scored the knockdown, right? He was up, and he thought, and we thought we're seeing the finish, right? I'll admit the same thing. But even against Povetkin, he was losing as well. But against Povetkin at that age, and Povetkin has not been ever the most mobile fighter, was never the quickest fighter, it wasn't going to work, the way Ruiz kind of pulled it off yesterday. So if I'm Ruiz, I'm going to capitalize on this. And that being said, we've seen how different some British fighters are at home, right? And I think, part of maybe some of that went into it, and that's why some of us thought that, why would Joshua leave the UK if he doesn't have to, right? And I think he would have taken care of Jarrell Miller, okay, but this is different. But on top of that, I think Ruiz is obviously going to have some pressure when he fights in the UK, but we've seen guys like Carl Froch is a different animal when he fought in the UK compared to when he didn't rather. So it's not, I'm not going to say that Joshua is not going to lose or not going to win the rematch. I think he'll still be the favorite, and I think he will win. But I don't think that's indicative of the trajectory of his career. And I don't think this really makes that much of a difference if Wilder and Joshua fight. I think both of them can still knock each other out. But I think what you're seeing is, and I think I mentioned this, people complain about the Klitschko era. People complain that he overmatched everyone and all that. But I said you're not going to see another guy dominate for 10 years, right? You can criticize his opponents, but he never. It's not like he ever avoided everyone. He fought everyone as quick as he could. There was never a 2-3 year delay from opponent to opponent, right? And what we're seeing here is, and during that 10-year run, he never had a hiccup. It was never a draw that should have went against him. None of that kind of stuff ever happened. He went in there and he smoked everyone. And even though this era is arguably more entertaining, I don't think there's really, even though Joshua Wilder might fight in arguably the biggest heavyweight fight, I don't think it's indicative of who's actually the best heavyweight. And I think this is why you're seeing that, because the last year or two, both of them have stepped up their competition a little bit, and neither of them has really impressed that much. Both of them have been entertaining fights, but it's never been like, wow, I think this guy is a top pound-for-pound guy. Where, again, Ruiz, a guy who's better, who has skill, a guy who's well-schooled, who has a strong amateur background, even with his 50 pounds of fat, comes in and schools the heavyweight champion of the world. So I think that Joshua's only going to learn X amount of skill between now and November. So if I'm Ruiz, I'm jumping on this opportunity again right away.
Okay. You know what occurred to me today, Travis? What if Luis Ortiz knocks out Wilder, which could happen? He almost did it last time. He definitely got that puncher's chance. Does the weight division get more interesting or less interesting if that happens?
You know what? There has to be some sort of stability as well in that division to keep it exciting, because if all these guys just keep upsetting guys, I think it does lose its luster of how good these guys really are. So I don't think we need any more upsets as of this early, at least. I don't think it would be great for boxing. I don't think it's going to be awfully terrible. But like I said, I think boxing, you need that elite guy that does stick out. But then every once in a while, you need that guy to be upset. And that's the thing about it. A lot of people, the funny thing is, I think Anthony Joshua, with this loss, I think he's going to gain more fans because people want to see that struggle. People always get behind the struggle, it seems like. So I bet his next fight with Ruiz is going to be so huge, and I bet they probably do better numbers in his next fight than they did this fight. And that's just because people love to get behind that struggle. They love to see a person who they thought was perfect become human. And then they like to build them back up. And that's exactly what's going on. I think that's exactly what Eddie Hearn will do with Joshua. He'll play up the big triumph. He'll play up the big setbacks, because in life we all have setbacks. That doesn't define us. What defines us is how we handle and step up after those setbacks. So I think Anthony Joshua it has a beautiful scenario in front of him right now. Even though he's upset, even though he just lost his first fight ever, he got demolished, at Madison Square Garden, where all of the great heavyweights have triumphed, Tyson, Ali, all of those guys. They fought at Madison Square Garden, and that's kind of why Joshua wanted to come over here. And it all kind of didn't work out in his favor, but the awesome thing about it is he's got a chance to regain the heavyweight title. He's got a chance to be a 2-time heavyweight champion of the world, and only how you do that is if you lose the title. So he lost the title. Now he's got to come back and get it back. So I think, honestly, it's a good thing overall, but I don't think we need another upset of Ortiz beating Wilder, because I think that would really lose the luster a little bit. I know that these promoters are brilliant out there. Top Rank, Eddie Hearn, Showtime, all of those guys. They're just brilliant at building up big fights, no matter what. So even if Ortiz beats Wilder, which could easily happen, guys, we all know that Ortiz can fight. We know that Ortiz was beating up on Wilder in the first fight, and then Wilder's just amazing power brought him back. So it could happen. That's the thing about boxing. Not just boxing, though. Boxing is unpredictable, but heavyweight boxing, that is one of the most unpredictable divisions in the sport, period, because the guys are so massive. And a guy like Deontay Wilder, he can literally change a fight in a couple of seconds with one blistering shot. He can be getting his butt kicked for 10 rounds and change the fight with one blistering shot, and that's the beauty and the beast of it all. So that's why the heavyweight division right now is rocking, and it's going to continue to rock. And there's so many other great divisions out there right now, but the heavyweight division is rocking because people want to see knockouts. No matter how good you are, no matter how skilled you are, people are drawn to the knockouts, and that's what's going on in the heavyweight division right now is knockouts. So it's at an all-time high in my opinion, and I think that boxing fans and all of us enthusiasts are definitely capitalizing on all this. It's fun. I mean, this is kind of fun, Dennis. I just love talking about something interesting, and the heavyweight division is interesting, and I think it deserves all the respect in the world, even though that, I'm a welterweight, light middleweight, and I always rally for that division. I think right now that we have to give props to the heavyweight division because those guys are going out there and they're killing it, and they're killing headlines, and they're stealing headlines, and they're stealing round of the year fights. Round of the year used to be in the lighterweight division, It definitely wasn't in the heavyweight divisions for the most part. We have a round of the year candidate from a heavyweight division, which is unheard of usually. So I'm excited. I think it's awesome right now.
Okay, last one for you. Riz, was this a fluke? Was this victory a fluke?
I don't think you can say that yet. I think, and again, it's a fluke when I think it's one shot. But when it's a sustained round to round schooling, because he was winning the fight, it wasn't a one punch shot. And I understand there was obviously the knockdowns and how it probably affected him and whatever else. But he was a calm fighter. He was a composed fighter. And even the first 2 rounds, he was backing up Joshua. Right? And backing up, I don't think, the way people said, Canelo was backing up Golovkin, but Golovkin has the boxing skills as well. So Golovkin probably thought, all right, you know what, I can go back to my jab and conserve some energy for late rounds. I don't think that was happening here with Joshua, right? I think Joshua just really didn't know what to do. So I don't think I think it's too early to say if something was a fluke or not. But I think part of this, and honestly, maybe I think it's almost divine intervention. I think it's just karma. I think this is what happens when you're thinking about another fighter. This is what happens when you're taking too long and expecting that other opponents are just going to be there and they're just going to come in and lie down until you can get that big fight. Again, Ruiz fought on 6 weeks' notice, and it's not like, some guys complain about not having enough time for a training camp. Ruiz, I think you can give him 5 years for a training camp. I don't think he's going to come in better shape. But I just think there was a guy who wanted it more and knew what to do. I think he, 6 weeks is not that much time to study an opponent that you're, especially of this caliber at the highest level. But I think he just has the boxing skills to understand what he needs to do. He was in the ring, saw when he was knocked down even. When Joshua scored that first shot, Joshua opened up, and Ruiz tried to counter him, but he couldn't get him there. And then when Joshua tried to finish him, then Ruiz saw that same opportunity. And it was just 20 seconds later. So I don't think Ruiz's strategy didn't really change. It just shows a lot of its composure. It's a lot of things. But I think the difference is he was ready for the moment. And I don't know if you can say it's, he might go down as a guy who pulled off the biggest upset ever and will still have a decent career. I don't think he'll ever obviously achieve something like this. I don't think if you put him against Wilder, I'm going to say he's going to beat Wilder or anything like that. But I think he's better than a lot of people thought he was. And I think it was also him there at the right time. And I think that matters. He was there at the right time. He was ready for the moment. And I think he obviously worked hard for it too. I mean, he wasn't there just to lie down. And I think that's important to know because I think, Julian Williams, Ruiz, those are 2 big upsets, right? And upsets of guys who didn't think really had a chance. They were there to be an opponent and nothing else. But they were there because they were an opportunity and they weren't just going to be the fill-in opponent. And that's why, Wilder purposely probably chose the Ortiz fight because he thought he didn't win convincingly enough the first time around. I think if Wilder ended up fighting, and I think this is a good scare for Wilder because I think at this point, if Wilder was going to take Ortiz lightly, I don't think he is anymore. But you see guys get a scare and then, correct their mistakes and work harder and all that. But usually the scare is, losing a close decision or something like that. Joshua was schooled. This wasn't a one-punch knockout. This wasn't Rahman Lewis. When Lewis was winning that fight, when he got caught, Lewis could have, at times was horrifically cocky. And he was lying on the ropes and smiling and he got caught. That's not what happened here, right? Joshua got schooled. And I think that's dangerous because he's raw, but he hasn't developed that skill set that we thought he was going to. Because if Ruiz, and again, amateur background, clearly knows what he's doing, clearly has a craft, but he was the guy who had 50% body fat was way more composed in the ring, had way more energy, and clearly I think if that fight's going 12, I think he wins that because he has the stamina. Joshua didn't. Joshua looked gassed. So there's a lot of holes that need to be corrected, and they got to correct it soon because when you're at the top, you can't go back to the bottom and start over again. He's got to, he has to win the rematch. If he doesn't win the rematch, there's going to be major trouble. It's going to be back to the regional circuit and starting from the bottom. And Joshua's still, a big a big fighter and a big name and all those things, but it's going to take him a while to get back to the top.
Okay, well, you know what? The next 2 weeks, the next 2 weekends look dull as dirt. Golovkin fights some guy named Steve Rolls on Saturday night on DAZN. Then the following weekend, we got Tyson Fury fighting some guy named Tom Schwartz, June 15th on ESPN+. So those are probably going to be short fights, but who the hell knows, huh? Will somebody knock off another?
Right.
Yeah. You never know in boxing, as Anthony Joshua just learned. So, and on the other hand, you usually do know. So, hey, that's Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, John J. Responti. There are boxing oracles, and they rock the house today as they do every week. Nobody does it better. So in another one more minute, John and I are going to be spinning some yarns about the glory days of West Coast boxing scene with Gene Aguilera, author of Latino Boxing in Southern California. Travis and Riz, you two have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
All right. And we'll be right back in about 1 minute here, so don't go away because there's plenty of show left.
You're listening to the Ringside Boxing Show, the hottest, sweatiest show on West Coast radio.
Put 'em up. Put 'em up. Which one are you afraid? I'll fight you both together if you want. I'll fight you with one paw tied behind my back. I'll fight you standing on one foot. I'll fight you with my eyes closed.
Hi, I'm Dennis Taylor, host of the Ringside Boxing Show, where since 2008 we have been continuously sponsored by Garcia Boxing, the first family of the sweet science on California's beautiful Central Coast. Trainers Max and Sam Garcia and ring strategist Dean Familton are regarded among the most knowledgeable in the game. And Kathy Garcia, who manages all Garcia boxing fighters, is renowned for her integrity and career guidance, having taken 2 boxers to #1 world rankings. Together they comprise one of the most respected teams in the sport. Learn more by calling 831-261-3214 or send them an email at garciaboxing25@aol.com.
Undefeated, a showdown, 2 world champions. Neither one of them has ever lost a fight. 22-year-old Zamora, a record of 28 wins, no losses. All 28 wins by knockout. Zarate, 46 wins, no losses. 45 of the 46 wins by knockout. Amazing record. Think of it. And look at this fella in the ring. How did he get in the ring? He's upper, green right. A young man with gray shorts on, a white shirt. He acts as if he is, I don't know, is he begging for peace or is he challenging the fighters? Or is he trying to give a spiritual message? Oh, there, the police really grabbed him. How on earth did he get in the ring?
Welcome back to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor with John J. Responti, and today's featured guest is an author who has been inducted into the WBC Legends Hall of Fame. And we spoke to Gene Aguilera a couple years ago about his previous book, which was called Mexican-American Boxing in Los Angeles. It was named Book of the Year by the West Coast Boxing Hall of Fame, and it painted a really colorful history for us of the vibrant L.A. boxing scene that John and I remember so well from our younger days as boxing fans. Guys like Ruben Olivares, Pepino Cuevas, Carlos Palomino, Danny Little Red Lopez, Bobby Chacon, Zarate and Zamora, who's the clip you just heard, Salvador Sanchez, all the way to Oscar De La Hoya. And we want to congratulate Gene Aguilera on a sequel, Latino Boxing in Southern California, which was honored this year as Book of the Year by the National Boxing Hall of Fame. Right. Gene Aguilera, welcome back to the Ringside Boxing Show. Congrats on all the above. How you doing?
Wow. Good, Dennis. Thank you. Thank you for having me back on Ringside Boxing Show. It's been a couple of years, and I really appreciate that you guys remember me, and we're going to get to do this interview. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is, and that clip that I just played at the top here, what kind of memories does that bring back for you, Zarate Zamora?
Okay, that's. I'm so glad you opened up with that clip, and because it just fits right into the vein, the life vein that I love about Latino boxing, I grew up in East LA as a young kid, and the Main Street Gym was just a bus ride away, and the Olympic Auditorium was just over the bridge there, and so I was just fortunate to grow up. I was born in 1953, so by the 70s I was getting into boxing big time. But I was introduced to boxing, when Cassius Clay fought Sonny Liston, their first fight back in 1964, and I was 10 years old, and that's what really got me hooked on the sport. Just the whole hype and promotion by Cassius Clay, as he was then known, got me into boxing, and from there I just kind of, being from East LA, just took a natural turn to start following all the great Latino boxers, Mexican-American, Mexican boxers, from Panama. And it's become a lifelong obsession and passion of mine. And it's resulted in 2 books, with my latest book that came out a few months ago.
Okay, so as a boxing historian, do you have any friggin' clue what that guy was doing in the ring, that guy in his underwear who interrupted the first round of the fight?
That's a great question. I'm assuming this is Dennis, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Dennis. That's a great question. I put on the introduction of my first book that was the most exciting fight that I've ever saw with my own eyes, being there in person. Now, in the first round, I mean, here's these 2 guys that undefeated WBC champion Carlos Zarate, WBA undefeated champion Alfonso Zamora, and I was following those guys. Before the fight, I was going to both. They were watching them train, and it was such a great build-up for that fight. It was a battle of disease, and as you know, that on that fight, it was at the Forum, but it was promoted by Don Frazier. And none of the champions wanted to pay the sanctioning fees. They thought it was just too much. So they made it a 10-round non-title fight. But it was still going to be for who was the best in Mexico, right? Who was the best bantamweight. But there I was at the fight. It didn't cost a lot of money. I think I paid like $10 to get in. I was, just up pretty high at in those days. But when that guy jumped in the first round, and I talked to both Zarate and Zamora. I'm very good friends with both of them, and Zamora had rocked Zarate and put him on his heel. He didn't knock him down, but he stunned him, and it. Zarate was how can I say it? He was staggered, but. And at that time, it was weird because this guy jumps in the ring with his karate moves, and everybody was like stunned. And it took about 2-3 minutes to get this guy out of there. So by that time, Zarate was pretty much recovered from Zamora's shots, and from there on he just took over the fight, and he knocked him out in the 3rd round, and just an amazing fight. There was bad blood in those days between both camps. Cuyo Hernandez, the famed boxing Mexican manager, was managing them both. So these guys knew each other really well. They sparred a lot out there in Mexico. And Zamora's father was getting more and more involved with Zamora's career. And, you start clashing with Cuyo Hernandez because Cuyo was spending too much time with molding Carlos Zarate. So Zamora's dad, Papa Zamora as we called him, he bought out the contract for $40,000, and so they were like 2 split camps. And if you guys remember, on the ring apron after that fight, Papa Zamora went up and attacked Cuyo Hernandez, and they had they threw a few shots at each other, kicking each other, but they were quickly separated. But I always wondered this, that, in boxing, we had the guy, the parachute guy in the Holyfield bullfight. Was that it?
Yeah, Fan Man. Yep.
The fan, what do you guys call him?
Fan Man. Yeah, the guy who parachuted
the fan man, the parachuted in. That was crazy. I always wondered as time went by that Julio Hernandez didn't have this guy ready to go in just in case, Zarate got in trouble, which he did. Did you guys notice that when in the first round that Zarate was stunned?
Oh, yeah. I think we both watched that fight many times. Yep.
Oh, yeah. I watched it.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, it was such a big deal. I mean, I was living out here in the Bay Area then too, but Dean, it was such a incredible fight in the sense that you had two unbeaten guys, and Zarate was just, I mean, he's kind of like the way the Monster is looked at now. He was, he had 45 knockouts and 45 wins, right? So he just had such heavy hands. But Zamora was also right there. So it looked like it would go the way it did. That's what I remember thinking. It was almost like who would get who first. But Zarate was definitely hurt in the first round. So what's interesting to me is what you're saying is possibly if that guy had done what he did, maybe Zamora might have got him. Is that what you're saying?
He might have taken him out because Zarate was staggered. And he wasn't in any chances of going down yet, but you never know what could happen with the next couple shots by Zamora.
Yeah. And you know what, Gina? You and I are born the same year, 1953, and I was a Colorado boy, so I can remember reading about that fight in advance in Sports Illustrated, and I'd never heard anything like this before. Two guys they're both from Tijuana originally, right? And that's what
Mexico. Both these guys are from Mexico City.
Okay,
yes.
but they were like stable mates or something at first.
Yes.
And good friends, and then they had that big falling out. And actually, Zarate, one guy had gone the distance with Zarate, 45 wins, 44 knockouts, and Zamora had knocked everybody out. I'd never heard anything like that before. Two undefeated guys.
Yeah, it was crazy.
With like 70 fights and 69 knockouts. Oh my God, what a showdown!
And both world champions.
Both world champions. And then you've got it in L.A., where Latino boxers are just revered. And the atmosphere in that arena that day must have been.
It was electric.
Yeah.
It was the tension was so thick when these guys came out for their ring walk, and they both come out. Check this out, guys. They both come out wearing red velvet trunks, the same color. And you could easily tell the difference between the two because Zarate was like 4 inches taller than Zamora, but they both came out in these red trunks, and it was just what a day that was, what a day. And I've got that. I wrote about that book in my new book, Latino Boxing in Southern California. I have a picture of the poster, the Battle of Disease of that fight there.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a collector, Gene, and a lot of the memorabilia you've gathered from a lifetime of boxing shows up in the book that you just mentioned, which is loaded with some tremendous photos. So give our audience some of the visual treasures that they're going to find in the Latino boxing in Southern California. It's tremendous, Gene.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've always been enamored with those boxing posters, and I used to pull them off the telephone poles. I used to put them around town to promote, and they were beautiful. I call them the floating head posters. And I've got maybe, oh my God, let me think. I've got over 100 of them. And I only collect the ones that are in L.A. and they have the floating heads. I got to see that, and and I've gotten them signed throughout the years by all the guys, And I've got Ruben Olivares, Alexis Arguello, World Featherweight Championship, beautiful color poster. In my book, I've got Olivares, Chucho Castillo. That was let's see, that was for the rematch. They fought 3 times at the Forum. I've got Lionel Rose against Ruben Olivares when Ruben Olivares won his first bantamweight title at the Forum, August 22nd, 1969. And Ruben was just in town recently, and he mentioned that this is his 50th anniversary of winning the title, and I was just floored by that. I can't believe how 50 years have gone by.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ruben was real quick note. Ruben was invited by Golden Boy Promotions, Oscar De La Hoya, to be the VIP guest at Fantasy Springs Casino. So Oscar has, guests every month. He had Palomino last month, and he's got Cotto for June. So he's done a good job of remembering a lot of these Latin legend boxers.
Yeah, exactly. For me, a big part, and for most people, I'm a little younger than you guys, but the Southern California boxing scene back in the time that we're talking about was so huge, and the venues were so incredible. Of course, the Olympic is just, to all of us that love that time, is obviously revered, Gene. I mean, it is the place. It is the Mecca. But then, as you said, you had the Forum. And then the Hollywood Legion Stadium that I know a little bit about because they filmed some movies there, a movie with my favorite actor, John Garfield. The boxing scenes were filmed there. And, of course, the L.A. Sports Arena, which was also tremendous because Danny Lopez and Bobby Chacon fought there. Of all of these places, a good question, which of these places feels most personal to you as a lifelong Southern California boxing fan?
Without a doubt, the Olympic Auditorium on 18th and Grand. I've got both of my books. I've got pictures of the Olympic because it just was such an iconic place. It was a community gathering place where Mexican Americans mingled with Mexican nationals. Who else was there? There was there was a little gambling section, a little bit of a underworld thing there that I saw a lot. All the gamblers would sit in the second or third row, and it was so funny because after each fight, they'd all stand. The 2 rows would stand up, and you'd see all this money exchanging hands. And they'd bet on every fight, almost every fight there, and it was just, I always used to look that way. And of course, on the second row, you had Ali Needham and Don Chargan. Don wore a weak Chargan, the great matchmaker of the Olympic Auditorium, who just recently passed away. And they had their little section there. So, and then you had the movie stars too. There was a lot of movie stars. You had Joey Heatherton, you had Richard Pryor, I mean, just on and on. You had Ryan O'Neal, you had Burt Reynolds. So you had the Hollywood scene. So you had it was just like a interesting mishmash of characters there, and it all worked out, and that was a place to go to on Thursday nights, and I was so hardcore, guys, that of course I'd like to, I was one with my friends and everything, but sometimes they'd have a fight there. There was a fight where I was following the ascent of Salvador Sanchez, and nobody had heard of him yet, and he fought on an undercard there, Bazooka Limon undercard, and there was Salvador Sanchez against Juan Escobar from Tijuana. And because I went because I wanted to see him, because I've been reading in the Esto, which is a Mexican publication, a daily Mexican sports publication, that this was the upcoming guy. He was the next great thing to come out of Mexico. So nobody wanted to go. So, bam, I went by myself, which I did several times. It was a little scary going by yourself sometimes. You didn't have that backup of the group, but that's how hardcore I was going by myself to see a great fight at the Olympic Auditorium. that was the place. I miss it dearly. I don't know why. Everything seems so real there, so realistic. And I love the Forum. I went there, many times, hundreds of times, many years. But the Olympic Auditorium, that's where I left my heart at, right there.
Exactly. And I have to say one thing, too, Gene. I went there in 1972, and I had been watching it on television on our old black and white TV. I'd watch it at like 12:30 in the morning in Northern California. We'd come in and being there and going through the lobby and the pictures, and then as the fighters would come up like warriors from another time, from underground, it was so incredible. And I don't think people that have never gone there really get it, because it was an intimate place, the Olympic. It still is. The building is still standing, as we know. Church now, as we know. But it's just, there was something just so special. I mean, I remember we were about 10 rows back. I was with my dad and my grandfather, and the cigar smoke and the smoke in general was just hovering over the ring. So, I mean, anybody who loved boxing, right, you just couldn't help it but fall. I think even somebody who was like, would fall in love with it, because it captured everything that makes the sport so fantastic, right?
Yes, exactly. It was just, to me, every fight was just more realistic. I can't explain why, because of all those factors that you mentioned. You'd walk in there and you'd smell the hot dogs and the beer, and then you walk inside and the cloud of smoke that hovered above the ring, and it just amazing. And it seemed like the boxers that fought at the Olympic, even got their up their game. I think that's the best way to say it. They even upped their game because they knew of all the great boxers who had fought there in the past. Like Mondo Ramos, Carlos Palomino, and back in the old days, Enrique Bolaños of the 40s and Art Aragon of the 50s. I mean, you just had to up your game if you wanted to get into the ring there at 18th and Grant.
Yeah, exactly.
What did you have a favorite? Did you have a favorite boxer growing up in Southern California when you were growing up?
Yes. My favorite boxer was, and still is Ruben Olivares.
Yes.
The four-time world champion, two-time bantam, and two-time feather. He won all his titles at the Fabulous Forum, and he was just such a charismatic guy. He fought at the Forum 22 times, 22 sellouts. I think there should be a plaque at the Forum. I remember in the old days they had a plaque for Neil Diamond for selling out like about 10 shows in a row or something like that. But I always told everybody there, hey, where's Ruben's plaque? He was here 22 times. And so, we were very good friends. He even baptized my little daughter, so we're compadres. And he's a good man, and I've accompanied him to Canastota many years. He got inducted in 1991. The place opened up in 1990 over there in Canastota, the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and Ruben came in the second year of their existence. So that just tells you how great he was.
Yeah. John, I might have interrupted you. You sound like you might have had another question about the venue there. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just curious too, Gene. Did you ever get a chance to go to any of the other ones? I mean, you mentioned the Olympic, of course, and you went to the Forum. How many fights did you go to the LA Sports Arena? Did you ever venture over to anything at the Hollywood Legion? I think the Hollywood Legion Stadium torn down. I'm not quite sure of the year, but the building still stands. So ever gone over there? And then, of course, there's Wrigley Field in L.A. where the baseball fans know the Home Run Derby was filmed. So, it's not standing anymore either. But the whole place is just loaded with history. So did you ever get to venture to these other places?
No, that's a great question. I went to the sports arena maybe about 10 times to see fights there. And, in fact, it's on the back cover of my new book. Do you guys have it there? They have my book right there.
Yeah.
If you flip to the back outside cover, there's a beautiful shot of the sports arena.
Yeah.
And I went there. I used to love it there, but not as much as the Olympic and the Forum. But the Sports Arena, unfortunately, now has been knocked down, and there's a brand new soccer stadium there, unfortunately. But the Hollywood Legion was before my time. But that was a place where Art Aragon fought many times, and a guy from Mexico named Pajarito Moreno. Never was a world champion, but such a colorful character. Are you guys familiar with him at all?
I am not. No, maybe John probably.
I know the name.
My book. Yeah, Pajarito Moreno was just a character. He had like 66 wins and 63 were knockouts. But he was like Pepino Cuevas. You know, if he got caught, he'd go down. He fought for the title one time at Wrigley Field. This was back in 1958. Now, I never saw any fights at Wrigley Field, but I did go there to watch an Angels game, Los Angeles Angels game. It was a great old stadium. You know, it was our answer to the Wrigley Field over there in Chicago.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
I know Wrigley Field was a little before my time, as was the Hollywood Legion. So, but I did go to the Wrigley Field, and I did take some pictures as a kid. I got these little black and white pictures of him, of the stadium. I mean.
Hey, Gene, tell our listeners a little bit about Art Aragon, because this guy was the original Golden Boy. You talk about a guy with personality.
Yes.
Talk about him a little bit. Yeah.
Yes. Art Aragon was like the star of the 50s in Los Angeles. When he came on the scene here in the early 50s, there was no Los Angeles Dodgers, there were no Angels, there were no Lakers, but there were the Rams. The Rams were here. But other than the Rams, Art Aragon was the only game in town. And he came into prominence when he beat Enrique Bolaños. Enrique Bolaños was the kingpin, the lightweight kingpin, never world champion, but he was a California lightweight champion. And when he fought Art Aragon, this was back in 1950, Aragon knocked out Enrique Bolaños at the Olympic Auditorium. And I'll read a little part from my book. It says, Aragon recalled to the Los Angeles Times, Bolaños was an idol to the Mexican community in Los Angeles. He was a really good fighter, too, and he was an idol of mine when I was coming up. But I beat him bad twice, and they didn't like that. I didn't like it much either, but then I started noticing the more people hated me, the more they'd pay top dollar to come boo me. So it was a passing of the torch there. And Art Aragon, as you stated, was the original Golden Boy. He was a little, perturbed when Oscar De La Hoya took the same moniker. But and he wouldn't go see Oscar fight. But one time they told Art Aragon, hey, Oscar's going to be fighting Relis in Vegas. Let's go. You're invited. He goes, no. He goes, well, how much are they paying Oscar? They tell him $9 million. He goes, anybody who gets $9 million can name himself anything he wants, And after that, he became a fan of Oscar's. But the original Golden Boy was a character, never a world champion. He did fight for the title once against Jimmy Carter. But they fought once. It was a non-title fight. And Aragon won. This was back in 1951. But then when all the marbles were on the line for the lightweight championship, Jimmy Carter defeated Aragon in a 15-round unanimous decision at the Olympic Auditorium.
Aragon was also a guy who always had some Hollywood babe on his arm, right? Some star.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, going back to being the only game in town, he was. He dated, at my first book, I got a picture of him and Marilyn Monroe, and he's about ready to enter her trailer while she's making this movie. So you can imagine what happened after that. He dated Mamie Van Doren, Jane Mansfield. You know, they're just the A-list Hollywood
blonde
celebrities of all the blonde bombshells of the day. You know, and
exactly. Exactly.
He was just a character, and I took pictures of him, you know, maybe 20 years ago, and I met him, and he was like one of the funniest characters I've ever met. We had him talk for the East LA Lions Club. He was our guest speaker, and everybody was just rolling because the guy was he could have made a big career as a comedian. He was that funny.
As a young guy in Colorado, watching this stuff on TV, my most memorable rivalry from LA, personally, is Bobby Chacon and Danny Little Red Lopez. You know, just spectacular. Yes. You know, they were just made for each other. What was yours? There were so many good rivalries there. Which one sticks out for you?
Oh my God, that one that you just mentioned right there.
Okay.
Both of these guys were actually Danny was undefeated, and Bobby had lost once just to Ruben Olivares, which is no slouch, obviously. And they fought at the sports arena, and Bobby was in his wheelhouse all night long. His overhand right just could not miss at all. This was back in 1974 in front of a sold-out crowd at this LA Sports Arena. And Bobby, that was, and check this out, guys. That wasn't even for the featherweight title. That was just a fight to see who was the would hold the Mythical City Championship of Los Angeles. I mean, nowadays they'd hold off on that one and make it a unification, for $20 million each. But in those days, it was just a regular 10-round fight promoted by Mrs. Eileen Eaton. And, to Danny Little Red Lopez's credit, he could have folded and just disappeared into obscurity, but he made himself a better fighter after that and went on to great things, as did Bobby. Both of these guys are Hall of Famers and just one of our Latino boxing idols here in Southern California.
Yeah, talk to us a bit about, you've mentioned him a couple of times. You mentioned Eileen Eaton and Don Chargan, but tell us about Don and his wife Lorraine and Eileen Eaton and some of the other people who helped shape the West Coast boxing scene.
Yes, Eileen Eaton, for all you listeners out there, she had weekly boxing shows at the Olympic Auditorium on Thursday nights, and in the beginning, in 1965, they would televise them, except she would not televise the main event because she'd want you guys to go down there in person, right? Mm-hmm. But she would give you just enough to wet the whistle, and you'd be out there in person the next week, And Don Chargan was just a genius, a Hall of Fame matchmaker for over 20 years, from 64 to 84 when they closed down the Olympic for the first time. Don was just a genius. He's influenced so many people like Eric Gomez and Roberto Diaz from Golden Boy Promotions. Don was just a sweetheart of a guy. I used to call him up at his house up there in Cambridge every once in a while and ask him a few questions, and always answered in good spirit and always wanted to help me. Don and Eileen sat next to each other along with Lorraine Chargan, which Don's wife. She was the business manager there at the Olympic, and that they were just such a great team. I know when Lorraine passed away, Don took it obviously very hard, but he continued, and he was. I think I saw him like 3-4 months before he passed away, and it was just very sad to see him like that. Another couple other characters from the old days at the Olympic was a guy named Ruiz Magana. He was they called the Spanish PR director, because there'd be a lot of fighters coming in from Mexico, and he would set up the press for radio interviews, TV interviews, newspaper interviews with La Opinión, which is a Spanish daily over here. And Luis Magana just was there at the Olympic all the time, dapper in his beautiful leisure suits, and he was just a character. He was just made things run over there. And also, I'll never forget Dr. Bernard Schwartz. He was the fight doctor at the Olympic, and one time I took a boxer to his office. He had an office in South Central LA, and I took a boxer there to get. I'm not going to mention the boxer's name, but you have to go get your physical to get it signed off before you can enter the ring. So we were there. There was the room full. The waiting room was like about 50 people there, and he saw us. He waved us in. We went in there. We were there for no more than 2 minutes, and the card was signed, and we were down the road. So it was just the way things got done in those days.
Yeah. And the other thing about L.A. is that the boxing history is they had some legendary boxing gyms there. And a little while ago you mentioned one of them, Main Street Gym, which is probably the most legendary, mostly because of who trained there. Sugar Ray Robinson was there. I mean, all the boxers before his time and around that time worked out there. The place was just incredible, and it was so nondescript. I've seen pictures. Unfortunately, I got there too late to see it. But tell everybody out there what made this place so special. Not only to be seen, but it was a proving ground for a lot of fighters, right?
Yes. That the Main Street Gym was, Cassius Clay went there, Muhammad Ali, a.k.a. Muhammad Ali, and I saw Roberto Duran train there, Alexis Arguello, Pepino Cuevas, all the great fighters, Lupe Pintora that came into L.A. for a big fight. And it was right there on the edge of Skid Row in downtown L.A. It was on Main Street between 3rd and 4th. Rough area. You wouldn't want to be there at night. And it was on the second floor of this building. I remember on the first floor there was a cleaners, a barber shop, and then you would walk into these doors, and they had a Main Street Gym sign that said "World-rated boxers train here daily." And you'd walk upstairs, and there you would be. You pay this guy 50 cents there to get in, and they had some bleachers and amazing posters on the wall. They had Joe Louis stand up, a Jack Dempsey, and they had 2 rings in there. And that place was run with an ironclad hand by the great oh my God, Howie Steinler.
Steinler, yes.
And Howie Steinler, and unfortunately he was murdered right after Danny Little Red Lopez won the title in Ghana against oh my God, help me out, guys. David Cote. David Cote, when Danny won the featherweight championship, and Howie Steinler was too sick to make the trip, but when Danny came back a few months later, Howie was murdered, and it's been a LA mystery because that case was never solved, and I hope someday that the family can have closure. Meaning Carol Steinler, who took over the gym after Howie passed away, but Howie was the character that Burgess Meredith modeled himself after in the Rocky movies. Yeah. He was just a tough little old man that you wouldn't want to mess with. I never wanted to look him in the eye. I just kind of just went over there and visited my friends, the boxers, and I got out of there. But man, what a legendary place! And there's a picture. I have a picture of it in my new book too, guys. Yeah, picture of the Main Street Gym right there at the very front on the left. And my new book, I wanted to tell everybody that it's in color. It's all in color.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever people start listing the greatest Mexican fighters of all time, Salvador Sanchez is always one of the top 2 or 3. What are your memories of that guy?
I was luckily, like I mentioned earlier, I was so fortunate to see him live with my own eyes, and he was just smooth. He fought like a veteran. He was a young guy. He died when he was 24 years old.
Yeah,
and just a young guy. His record was 44 wins with 32 knockouts and 1 loss.
Yeah.
And his last fight, he destroyed Azuma Nelson, and they battled the Little Giants when he fought Wilfredo Gomez. He just totally just took him apart, just dismantled the great Wilfredo Gomez, who was also. Let me tell you Gomez's record. He was 44-3 while fighting from 1974 to 1989. He's a Hall of Famer, just one of the world's greatest. And Salvador Sanchez literally just took him apart bit by bit until he knocked him out in the, let's see, what round was that? Do you guys remember? 8th round. He knocked him down several times, and you couldn't even recognize Gomez's face after the fight. It was so disfigured. Both his eyes were closed shut. And I think Sanchez, I've read a lot and I've talked to a lot of people, but Sanchez was really bothered by Gomez because of what Gomez did to Carlos Zarate there in 1978 in Puerto Rico. Do you guys remember that fight?
Yeah, I beat him up bad.
Yeah. Zarate, that was his first loss. Zarate moved up in weight to super bantam, and he went down there, and Gomez was just, the frame was too big. And so during the build-up of the fight between Sanchez and Gomez, Gomez taunted him, challenged his manhood, and Sanchez was there to pay a debt. And I think he carried him. He could have knocked him out in the first, second round, but I think he carried him because he wanted to punish him. But
Wow.
Sanchez, is to me, he's one of the top 3 Mexican fighters of all time.
Yeah, exactly.
Without a doubt.
And I got to say this too, being a fan of Danny Little Red Lopez.
Yes.
Gene, what happened to Danny? He fought him. He lost that. Well, he competed, but he got stopped. He fought him again, and you knew after the first fight, if you followed boxing, that Salvador Sanchez just had too much skill, and he had a great chin too. People don't remember that. He had everything. He was loaded, and one, both of those fights were really painful. I think the second one was harder to watch, just because Sanchez just tattooed Danny with so many punches. And I remember thinking, I'm so glad that he retired, because there was no way he would ever beat Sanchez. Not that they would ever fought again. But Sanchez was just too good. It's just the way it is. There's always been a thing about there's always somebody who's a little better than you. And right. Danny, who came back from so many beatings at times, get knocked down, get up, knocked out. He couldn't do it with Sanchez, and that just tells you how good Salvador Sanchez was.
If Sanchez didn't die in that auto wreck, he was driving a Porsche on his way back to camp in the middle of the night, because he went out to party with some friends, and he wanted to be back in camp because he was training for the rematch with Juan Laporte. And so, there he is in these lonely Mexican highway, just at 5 a.m, just speeding back in a brand new Porsche, and bam, he ran into this garbage truck, and he died instantly. But just guys, just wonder how good he would have been had he fought, like the 35 years old. How great!
Yeah.
He probably would have fought Julio Cesar Chavez at some point too.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me more about
Danny Red Lopez told me that if he fought Sanchez 100 times that Sanchez would have beat him 99 out of those 100. I couldn't figure him out.
That's right. Tell the audience a little bit more about the Latino, your second book, The Latino Boxers in Southern California, because your first book was Mexican American fighters in Los Angeles, and the second one was Latino. So you were able to include more fighters. Tell the audience a little bit about who else you were able to include in your second book.
Yes. My first book, was more than Mexican American, like you stated. Like guys like Carlos Palomino, Armando Moniz, Danny Little Red Lopez, Bobby Chacon, Art Aragon, Mondo Ramos, on and on and on. Yeah. And a lot of people, where I was doing, a book signing tour, they would say, "Hey, do you have Chavez in there? No. Do you have Sanchez in there? No." And boom, the light went on in my head, and I said, I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to put a lot of these great Mexican fighters, but not limited just to Mexico. I mean, you've got Alexis Arguello from Nicaragua, you've got Wilfredo Gomez from Puerto Rico, and you've got Roberto Duran from Panama. So I made sure that these guys were highlighted in my new book here, and it just gave me that great idea to do that. And I said, and I started looking through all these memorabilia that I have, the posters, the programs, the pictures, and most of them were in color. So I called the book company and says, I really want to do this second book in color. My first one was black and white, and they green lighted me to do it, and it just came out beautiful, man. Just in I call it Technicolor spotlight. The colors just kind of come off the pages, and it's just a great book just to look at. I mean, in my books, they're pictures and captions, so you're not gonna go through a lot of text and see a picture. It's a very entertaining and easy to read book. And what the character that I really identified with or learned the most about was this boxer that we talked about earlier in this hour, Pajarito Moreno. Yeah. Because he was just such a character. He made movies. He would also, and he would date the beautiful women. And if I could just read this one little blurb I have here on just a little bit of about Pajarito. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay. It says, Bud Furillo of the Los Angeles Herald Examiner called Moreno a colorful kid who prefers his road work on the dance floor with a cha-cha-cha beat. The whole world loves a puncher, and few hit like Pajarito, which means little bird. Mm-hmm. Danny Villanueva described Pajarito, the electricity that he brought to the Olympic Auditorium. When Pajarito left the dressing room, the ripple would go through the crowd even before they could see him. The guy's charisma was so incredible that the people could sense him, and the place would shake with chants of Mexico, Mexico. That was the guy that I just kind of really got into, because I probably knew the least about him. But after the writing the book, I felt like he was just part of my family, Unfortunately, he passed away. He ran into some really bad times, as a lot of boxers do, and he was kind of living in the streets. He was an alcoholic, and he even lived on a couch in some boxing gym in Mexico. But he starred in this Mexican movie. Dated his co-star and Miss Universe contestant Ana Berta Lepe. And he used to pack it in at the Olympic Auditorium in the Hollywood Palladium. And let me just read this little couple quick lines. This is I'm really proud of this caption here. But it said, lured by the Mexican jet set, Moreno began living the high life. He sported diamond rings while driving around in a new gold-capped Cadillac convertible in Italian Fiat. He bought a mansion, a racehorse named 7-Eleven, and a boat for carousing at sea. At his restaurant, La Flor de Acapulco, Moreno lit cigars with bills of 100 pesos. A friend, Julio Correa, remembered. Tintan, which was a Pacheco actor-singer, taught him how to dress up. He was always presentable because his weakness was women, especially blondes with long hair. So, as you can see, this guy was a character, a very good fighter, maybe not great because he had no defense, kind of like a la Pepino Cuevas did.
Right.
Towards the end of his career, but I really learned a lot about him, and a little bit of Pajaritos is inside of me forever.
Yeah. Speaking of a legend, Gene,
yes.
April 28th, we were at the National Boxing Hall of Fame in the LA area, and Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. obviously was honored. And what are your early memories of watching a young Julio Cesar Chavez in the ring?
Wow, Julio, as much as I love my compadre Ruben Olivares, I got to give it to Julio Cesar Chavez as the greatest fighter to come out of Mexico. He was just amazing. Let me see, his final record. Let's see if we can find it real quick here. His final record was 107 victories with 86 knockouts and 60 defeats.
Yeah.
I mean, he won, how many titles did he win? At least 6. And just Julio, I saw him fight a couple times live. I saw him fight at Tijuana. I saw him fight at the Forum against Roger Mayweather and Ruben Castillo. I saw him at the Olympic when he won his first title against Azabache Martinez, which it's all these fights are in my book. Just Julio was just amazing. He had an iron chin. I mean, he would.
Yes. People
would hit him with some shots, and he'd walk right through them. And his left hook to the body, just incredible. The all-around boxer. When he got beat by Frankie Randall that was his first defeat. He was partying a lot, doing drugs and drinking, but thank God these days, John, as you saw him, he's in great shape.
Yes.
Just an idol. When he was making his speech, as you remember, John, you couldn't hear a pin drop in the room. We just hung on to every word he said. And then after Chiquita Gonzalez got inducted, Julio left, which was maybe the program was maybe 60% done. But when Julio left, I got up and took the mic and I said, it feels like Elvis has just left the building because at least a third of the crowd just left with him, and they wanted an autograph, a picture, and he probably didn't have enough adequate security to get him out of there. But I heard it got pretty hairy there on the way out for him.
Well, we talked about Danny Little Red Lopez, and he was there, and Danny is just about the best, and his wife Bonnie is incredible. And so when we talk about them, we talked a little bit, I did, about Danny Little Red Lopez and his battles with Bobby Chacon and with Sanchez, but what do you remember about him? What sticks out to you about Little Red? And then his somewhat forgotten brother, Ernie Indian Red Lopez, who was a highly ranked contender in the 70s, fought Napoles a couple times, was a very good fighter. Tell me what you think about when you're thinking about Little Red and his big brother, Indian Red Lopez, Ernie.
Danny was incredible. I mean, he was kind of, when I used to see him fight, I says, he didn't look buffed out. He didn't have the six pack, but this guy was just had a will to fight, a resolve, a tenacity. Once you knocked down Danny Little Red Lopez, you might as well consider yourself done. He was going to get up off the deck, and he was going to knock you out in a few rounds. Exactly what happened when he fought Ruben Olivares at the Forum. Ruben had him down in, I think, the first or second round, and Danny came back and knocked Ruben out in the fourth. there he was with his red hair and incredible fighter. To me, one of the greatest featherweights that ever lived was Danny Little Red Lopez. And today, every time I see Danny, I just love the guy. And him and his wife, she takes great care of him, and she brings him to these functions, and it's just so great that we have him. He's a treasure for us here in LA. Everything that he did for us to entertain us and become one of the greatest of all times in his weight class. Yeah. And his brother Ernie was also a great fighter. Ernie he had 2 fights with Hedgeman Lewis. I think they went 1-1. He lost both title fights to Montequianopoulos, and Armando Muniz knocked out Ernie at the Olympic Auditorium in an exciting fight, welterweight clash. But unfortunately, Ernie just didn't win a world title, but a very popular guy, overshadowed by his younger brother Danny, but still a staple of LA boxing. And do you guys remember that time when Ernie Lopez was when he got lost? None of his family knew where he was. Yeah. And they put it out there in the news, and and for years he was missing, maybe 10 years, I don't know, but they found him. I think it was in Oklahoma at some home, some kind of care home, and they brought him out to LA, and they had him at Stevens Steakhouse at I forget the organization, that maybe Golden State Boxing, or they made a big thing for him there, and the news was there. Muhammad Ali even showed up to East LA. It was unbelievable. And CNN interviewed him, and it was a big thing. And then it turns out, maybe within a year, Ernie was gone.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's
sad story, but at least his family had closure, and they found him.
Yes.
This is the Ringside Boxing Show from Monterey, California. I'm Dennis Taylor with John J. Responte. We are talking to Gene Aguilera. His new book is Latino Boxing in Southern California. I'm going to play you another quick clip right now that's going to bring back some memories. Here we go.
Armando Muniz, a graduate of Cal State, Los Angeles. He is working on his master's degree. In fact, Carlos Palomino is also a college graduate. Graduated just a couple months ago in physical education at Long Beach State. A couple of college grads fighting for the title. You ever hear of that before? A left hook, yes indeed, a left hook put Palomino on the deck. A left hook to the chin.
What is the first thing that pops into your head about Carlos Palomino?
Carlos Palomino he's a dear friend of mine today. God, he was, he was like the Oscar De La Hoya of the 70s. He was, after he became champion, he defended his title 7 times, and Las Vegas, and he fought at the Olympic many times, and I remember watching him on TV, and it was before one of his fights on, I think it was at ABC, and there's Carlos driving down his block. They were shooting B-roll. He's driving down his block in Huntington Beach in a brand new Mercedes, and he pulls up into this beautiful 2-story house, and there's another Mercedes in the driveway, and he was just a star, and just a class act, a star. I'm really proud of him, and that first fight he had with Armando Muniz at the Olympic, that was a war, man. Carlos won a TKO over Armando in the 15th round, but as Jim Healy said in that little clip he played, I mean, that was Muniz had him down in the first, second round.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, first round, opening round. Yeah.
First round. Yeah. Ruiz dropped him, and that was Carlos's first defense of his welterweight title. You know.
Yep.
So he probably said, "Hey, I got a long day in front of me, guys."
Yep.
And he came back and stopped Ruiz on a TKO in the 15th. He dropped Armando, and Armando got up. He was shaky, and Carlos went in for the kill, and the referee luckily, thankfully, stopped the fight for Armando because he would have got hurt.
And Carlos Palomino, a lot of people don't remember this, but he actually had a second career in boxing. He had different boxing careers.
Yes. Talking about his acting career or about his comeback that he made?
I'm talking about his comeback. Amazing.
Yes, his comeback. Let me tell you guys a quick story, a really interesting story. After Carlos he lost his title to Wilfredo Benitez by split decision over there in Puerto Rico. And then he fought his next fight. I mean, they made him a great offer. I think it was a Don King promotion. He made Carlos a great offer to fight Roberto Duran in New York, Madison Square Garden, on the undercard of Larry Holmes and Mike Weaver. And Carlos told me, he goes, of all my, he didn't lose very much, but I think he lost only like 3 times in his career. But he said the only true guy that beat him was Roberto Duran. I mean, that was he tips his hat off to Duran. But after that fight in 1979, Carlos retired, of course, and he made this amazing comeback 18 years later in 1997, and I write about that in my book also. He made a comeback to the ring. He won 4 in a row by knockout, and unfortunately, in his last fight at the Olympic Auditorium, it was against Wilfredo Rivera, who had just lost to De La Hoya in a title fight. This was a Bob Arum promotion at the Olympic, and he called it what was the theme of the fight? Forever Young. And after Palomino was hampered by a long 7-month layoff from the ring, and he also had an ear infection that night, and he dropped a 10-round unanimous decision to Wilfredo Rivera of Puerto Rico in 1998 and immediately announced his retirement. But the fact that he still fought as a welterweight, in fact, he's still at his welterweight weight today at 147, in great shape. It's just a testament to his physical ability to be able to make a comeback at 48 years old and reel off 4 knockouts in a row. Just incredible.
Yeah.
Class act.
What about how about Mondo Ramos?
Mondo Ramos was the star of LA. I'll give you guys a quick little history lesson in LA boxing. The 40s was Enrique Bolaños. The 50s was Art Aragon. The 60s was Mondo Ramos, and the 70s was Carlos Palomino. Those are the guys that carried boxing here in LA. And Mondo was Eileen Eaton's darling. She loved him. She groomed him. He became the youngest man to win the lightweight championship of the world when he beat Teo Cruz. And Mondo had a lot of bad habits, unfortunately, and it curtailed his career considerably. But the fact, he was a 2-time lightweight champion because he came back and won the title again. So we had a 2-time lightweight champion. Didn't have a lot of defenses, maybe 3-4, but he still beat some great fighters like Raul Rojas. He beat Sugar Ramos. Beat some great fighters. And I think he should be in the Hall of Fame, in the International Hall of Fame, just for the fact that he carried L.A. on his shoulders during the 60s, and it was a 2-time lightweight champion. You had Broadway Joe Namath, who carried New York on his shoulders during the 60s also, and, won the Super Bowl. And I think Mondo kind of mirrored that career in Los Angeles here and carried the town in the 60s in the boxing realm.
Yeah, exactly.
What about Vicente Saldivar?
Oh, it's a great. Thank you for asking about him. Yep. Vicente Saldivar is another boxer, just like Pajarito Moreno, that I feature in my second book here. Vicente Saldivar is somebody that nobody talks about anymore. I mean, a forgotten figure. I can't understand why. He was a lefty. He just had a look of how can I say? He just had a look of regal. He just had a regal look about him, and he was the undisputed featherweight world champion. Incredible record. He finished with a win of 37 wins and 3 defeats. I learned so much about him in my second book, and he was on the cover of Ring. He actually retired 3 times because he went through the whole top 10 contenders, had nobody to fight, so he wasn't going to fight for anything less than what he was getting, than a good payday. And he just went through everybody, and he retired like 3 different times during his career. And every time he came back and won the title, when he felt like unretiring and there would be somebody good coming up in the ranks, he'd come back and he'd win the title again. Just incredible boxer, Vicente Saldivar from Mexico City.
Yeah. Yeah, what about Lupe Pintor, another fighter who I remember won another world title later in his career? He's another guy that's not talked about very much anymore. Yeah. Right.
Lupe Pintor, man. God, he used to fight at the Olympics so many times. I just saw him there just coming up, and unfortunately I was there the night that he fought Johnny Owen of Wales, and Johnny Owen passed away a few weeks later after that fight. It's not Pintor's fault. They're both in the ring trying to beat each other, and just unfortunately Johnny didn't make it through that one. But the comeback that after Pintor made 8 defenses of his bantamweight crown, he came back in 1985 and challenged Juan Kid Mesa for the WBC Super Bantamweight title. I remember watching that on TV, and I says, I think Kid Mesa is gonna kill Pintor, and Pintor has turned it around on him and defeated him, a unanimous decision, a 12-rounder. And in my book, I've got a picture of in the catacombs there at the Olympic Auditorium with me, Lupe Pintor, and the great boxing manager Julio Hernandez.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. How about Pepino Cuevas? I mentioned him a few times, but man, he was a rock'em sock'em guy, and he was,
man. He's another very dear friend of mine. But a lot of people don't realize, and I made this a big thing in my book, that Cuevas had 11 title defenses of the WBA welterweight title, and that's a lot of defense. I mean, all of them weren't against great opponents. I mean, he fought guys like Scott Clark of Florida and watched Billy Backus, but you still got to give him credit for putting together 11 title defenses. I mean, that's outstanding in my book. He was from Mexico City, and he was just an assassin in the ring. Man, if he caught you with that left hook, it was good night. He broke jaws. I think he broke Clyde Gray's jaw at the Olympic Auditorium. And at that time, he was the youngest boxer in history to win the world welterweight title when he beat Angel Espada in Puerto Rico in 1976.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to the great Mexican assassin. And you know what? I wish I at one time in Canastota, I got Carlos Palomino and Pepino Cuevas, just the 3 of us. I put a huddle and I says, man, I wish you guys would have fought at the Coliseum. You would have sold out 90,000 tickets. Both of you guys were world champions. And they both wanted to fight each other, except they both wanted $500,000 each, which is not much in today's market, right?
Yeah.
And it just never got put together. And then Carlos got offered $450,000 to go to Puerto Rico to fight Wilfredo Gomez, and when he lost the title, that ended the dream of uniting, having a unification title fight between both those guys.
Hey, one more question for you. One more topic, because I think we're wearing you out here.
Okay.
Last month, one of our guests was Jeffrey Sussman, author of Boxing and the Mob. Always a fascinating topic. When you were attending fight places like the Olympic, were you aware of those guys?
I saw them. Yes, they had the little section, and then nobody messed with them, and they didn't mess with you. But they were all nicely dressed guys in hats. You gave them the respect, and you didn't bother them. They didn't bother you. They went there to have a good time. They went there to bet. And, what I said earlier, it was funny because after every fight, after the decision was announced by Jimmy Lennon Sr., they'd get up and you'd see all this money go fly, exchanging hands, It was something, it was a scene out of a movie.
Wow. Hey, Gene Aguilera, congrats on another fantastic job. Another book of the year, Latino Boxing in Southern California.
Thank you, John.
Always loads of fun talking to you, and we feel even more privileged that now you're an official boxing deity, a member of the WBC Legends Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Congratulations to both you guys for your great book on the Gotti Mickey Ward trilogy there.
Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, we got book of the year too in between a couple of
years. Yes, congratulations, man. Hey, just real quick tidbit. I am working on my third book.
Go ahead.
I'm chipping away at it. I don't want to disclose too much, but it's going to be in the Latino boxing vein. It'll be my third book on the subject. But I don't want to jinx it too much. I haven't signed the contract yet, but it's going to be a good one. It's going to be another good one.
Outstanding. I believe you. Latino Boxing in Southern California, published by Arcadia, right? Arcadia Press?
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah, and you can find it, just Google it on the Internet, Latino Boxing in Southern California. It'll pop up on Amazon, various other places where you can order it. And it's available in paperback, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And all right, that is Gene Aguilera. He's the author. Thanks for making some time for us today, buddy, on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Thank you, John and Dennis.
Thank you.
You guys, you make talking about boxing fun and easy, something we all love.
Yep.
Our passion, and you guys make it happen all the time.
Hey, man. Thanks to you too. Okay, appreciate it, Gene.
Okay,
have a good one.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Hey, do you like this show? Do us a solid. Tell other boxing fans about us. Post the Ringside Boxing Show on your social media outlets and help us grow. Also, if you haven't yet discovered the #1 website in the world for daily boxing news, you got something to do right this minute. We update ringsideboxingshow.com with the biggest headlines and hottest stories every single day, 365 days a year. You won't believe your eyes. Check it out right now and be amazed. ringsideboxingshow.com. Thanks, as always, to our expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwan Zahid, John J. Responti, for their weekly contributions to this show, as well as our outstanding British correspondent, Paul McLaughlin. And, of course, another huge thanks to today's featured guest, Hall of Famer Gene Aguilera, whose book is Latino Boxing in Southern California. It's published by Arcadia Press, and you can find it right now on Amazon and other book-selling outlets. Finally, thanks to you, Ringside Nation, for being a part of our worldwide audience again today. Keep your chin tucked. We'll talk to you again next week on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Well, it's a great day for me to whoop somebody's ass. It's a bad day, so you better get off of my back. You might get cold cocked if you cross my path.